The monitoring station smelled like a decade of burnt coffee and recycled air that had been breathed too many times. Marius Corbin sat with his chair tilted back, boots propped on the console edge, watching a screen that had not changed in 6 hours. Amber emergency lighting flickered across the room, casting long shadows that shifted and stretched like something alive. Nothing out there. Nothing ever out there. That was the job. Watch the empty dark until your eyes went dry and your back went tight, and you forgot what sunlight felt like. The door hissed open behind him. Marius did not turn around. He knew the footsteps, measured, deliberate, no wasted motion. Commander Durand crossed the room without announcement and stopped 3 feet behind his chair. Marius let the silence stretch. He knew the game. Let the officer speak first. "The Nulvara are moving a probe through the Vaar corridor," Durand said. His voice was quiet, almost gentle. The kind of voice that did not need to raise to be heard. Marius dropped his boots to the deck and swiveled the chair around. Durand stood with his hands clasped behind his back, those cracked spectacles catching the amber light, reflecting nothing. The man looked like he had been carved from old stone. "What does that have to do with me?" Marius asked. "I fix things, I do not plan them." Durand reached into his pocket and pulled out a data pad. He held it out without explanation. Marius took it. The screen showed a signal trace, clean and sharp against the background noise of the drift. "That probe is carrying something new," Durand said. "A signal pattern that does not match any known Nulvara communication protocol." Marius studied the trace. His fingers moved across the data pad, zooming in on the waveform. Something cold settled in his chest. "This matches the architect probe's fingerprint." He said it flat, a statement of fact, because he did not want to believe it. Durand did not confirm. He did not deny. He just stood there, still as a statue, watching Marius with those pale eyes behind the cracked glass. Marius laughed. It came out hollow, without humor. "That is impossible. The architects vanished 3 million years ago. There is no signal. There has never been a signal. That probe is a dead thing drifting through dead space." "The Nulvara are scared," Durand said. "They have pulled their picket ships back to the drift edge. They are leaving the Vaar corridor unguarded." Marius stared at him. The words landed and his mind did the math before his emotions caught up. If the Nulvara were afraid of the architects, and humans could prove they were not afraid of the same thing, the whole proxy war shifted. The balance of power in the corridor would tilt. Colonies that had been squeezed for decades could breathe again. "You want to intercept it," Marius said. "I want you to come with me to the Stardrift." Durand said it like it was already decided. "Why me?" Durand did not answer immediately. He looked around the monitoring station, at the 6 crew members who were pretending not to listen, at the flickering lights, at the stale air that clung to everything. Then he looked back at Marius. "Because you understand machinery better than anyone in this sector, and because you have a complete lack of respect for authority." Marius waited for the punchline. It did not come. "We will need that," Durand said. "Come with me." Marius turned back to the console. He pulled up the signal feed. The station's speakers crackled to life, and then he heard it for the first time. A pulse, regular and deliberate. Like a heartbeat. It came through the speakers low and steady, vibrating in his chest, thrumming through the deck plates. Marius felt it in his teeth. He watched the waveform scroll across the screen, each pulse identical to the last, spaced exactly 1.7 seconds apart. Mechanical, precise, alive. The fear he expected did not arrive. He had braced for it, waited for that cold wash of panic that should come with realizing he was about to touch something 3 million years old. Instead, he felt a sharp, clean curiosity. The kind that had made him take apart his first engine at the age of 7. He wanted to know what was inside that probe. He wanted to know what had been watching them all this time. Marius stood up, his knees cracked. He had been sitting too long. "I need 15 minutes to pack," he said. Durand nodded once. "The Stardrift is waiting at docking bay 4. Marius walked toward the door, then stopped. He looked back at the screen. The pulse continued, steady as a metronome, regular as a heartbeat. "What changed?" he asked. "The signal trace shows the probe changed course. It was heading away from human space. Now it is heading toward us." Durand said nothing. Marius pressed harder. What did it detect? What made it turn around? Durand stood in the flickering amber light, his reflection broken by the cracked lenses of his spectacles. He looked at Marius for a long moment. The silence stretched. The pulse thrummed through the speakers. "I cannot tell you what it detected," Durand said. Because I do not know. He paused, but I can tell you what it passed through. It passed through the Vaar corridor for 9 days without changing course. Then it reached the outer edge of human space, and it turned around. Marius waited for more. Durand gave him nothing. What is in human space that a 3-million-year-old probe wants to see? Durand looked at him for a long moment. The pulse continued its steady rhythm, filling the space between them. The amber light flickered. You are... The deck of the Vaar-Drift hummed under Marius's boots. A low vibration, steady and constant, like something alive breathing beneath the plating. The crystalline hull did that, resonated with every system on board, turning the whole ship into a tuning fork. He stood near the communications station, hands shoved in his pockets, trying to look like he belonged on a bridge. He did not belong on a bridge. Lena Eklund sat in the pilot's seat, her fingers dancing across controls she had memorized years ago. She was humming something under her breath, a folk song, something about a ship that never came home. Marius recognized the melody and wished he did not. Commander Durand stood at the center of the room, hands clasped behind his back. His cracked spectacles caught the glow of a dozen holographic displays. He had not moved in 3 minutes. Marius had counted. The probe appeared on the forward screen as a point of light, then another. Then a sphere resolved itself from the darkness, smooth, black, warm-looking even through the sensor feed. It matched the data from the monitoring station exactly, the architect probe. It did not flee, it did not attack. It stopped. The Vaar-Drift slowed to match its velocity, the crystalline hull groaning softly as inertia shifted. Marius felt the change in his knees. Open a channel, Durand said. The communications officer hesitated. Sir, we do not know what protocol. Open a channel. The officer obeyed. A tone sounded through the bridge speakers, a harmonic pulse that rose and fell 3 times before something answered. The containment field shimmered to life on the main display. A distortion in the air like heat haze over a hot road. Silver and indigo pulsed inside it, no shape Marius could name, no center, no edges. Just light moving in patterns that almost meant something. Then the voice came, soft, layered, multiple tones speaking as one, each syllable a chord. I am Saren, emissary of the Nulvara Free Systems. You are intercepting an architect relic. Explain your purpose. Marius blinked. The voice was not hostile, it was curious. The same tone a researcher might use when an unexpected specimen crawled out of a sample container. Durand did not flinch. We are not intercepting a relic, we are intercepting a functioning device. Saren's containment field flickered. A pause stretched long enough that Marius checked to see if the channel had dropped. You are the first species to recognize that distinction, Saren said. Marius muttered before he could stop himself. It is not a relic, it is still working, that is the whole point. Durand did not look at him. Good, Marius had not been invited to speak. Saren's tones shifted, the chords resolving into something softer. Humans value function over age. We value function over everything, Durand said. Something that still works is not ancient, it is simply old, there is a difference. The containment field pulsed. Marius could not tell if the gesture meant anything. It might have been breathing, it might have been thinking. Do you understand what the probe represents? Saren asked. Durand took a step closer to the display. We understand it represents a species that was old when the galaxy was young. We do not fear it, we want to study it. Silence, the crystalline hull hummed. Lena's humming had stopped. Marius could hear his own pulse in his ears. Then Saren spoke again, and the question shifted the entire weight of the room. Why do humans not fear the architects? Marius watched Durand's face. The commander did not hesitate. His posture did not change. His voice stayed level and quiet. Because we have already studied the probe, we found nothing to fear. A lie, Marius knew it the moment the words left Durand's mouth. There had been no study. There had been a 6-hour shift staring at a blank screen. There had been a fractured reflection in cracked spectacles. There had been a commander who refused to answer the simplest question. Durand was making it up, every word. And Saren's containment field shimmered in acceptance. The Nulvara could not detect the lie. Marius watched the realization settle into his bones like cold water. Human survival depended on being believed, not on being right, not on being strong, on being believed. Durand had just demonstrated human doctrine in 4 sentences. Marius felt his mouth go dry. Saren's layered voice came again, slower this time, as if weighing each syllable. The Nulvara have avoided the architects for cycles beyond counting. We do not touch their works. We do not follow their signals. We do not. The probe pulsed. A single burst of data, directed at the Vaar-Drift. Marius saw the numbers flood across a secondary display, coordinates, a star map, a time signature. The navigation officer swore under her breath. Durand looked at the readout. He went very still. His hands remained clasped behind his back. His face did not change. But the stillness was wrong. It was the stillness of a man who had just walked into a room and found something he never expected to see. The coordinates pointed to a system Marius had never heard of. Empty space on every chart he had ever studied. Nothing there, no star, no station, no record of anything. Saren spoke before Durand could. That system was erased from galactic records by the collective agreement of every major species, including the Nulvara. Durand turned his head toward the containment field. Erased. Removed, deleted, made to have never existed. Saren's tone was flat now, no chords, a single note. It is called the Grave of Cantor. The bridge went quiet. Even the hum of the crystalline hull seemed to drop in pitch. Marius looked at the coordinates on the display. A system that did not exist. A grave with no body. A message from a species that died before humanity learned to make fire. And Durand was already reaching for the navigation console. "Set a course," he said. Lena turned in her seat. "Sir, we do not have charts for that region. We do not have charts for that region because it does not exist." Set a course. The Vaar-Drift began to turn. The architect probe did not follow. It hung in the darkness, a floating sphere of warm obsidian, its message delivered. Saren's voice came through one last time. "You will not find answers there. No one ever has." Durand adjusted his cracked spectacles. "We are not looking for answers." He did not say what they were looking for. The containment field dissolved, the channel closed, and the Vaar-Drift accelerated toward a hole in the galaxy where something had been erased so thoroughly that even the memory of its existence had been outlawed. Marius stood at the communications station, hands still in his pockets, and watched the stars stretch into lines as the ship pushed forward. He had never been this scared and this curious at the same time. Lena started humming again, the same song, a ship that never came home. Marius was beginning to understand why. The quarter was a coffin with a desk. Ansel Durand sat in the yellow circle of light and watched the dust motes drift through the beam. They caught the light like tiny stars, aimless and slow. He had been staring at them for 3 minutes, maybe longer. The glass in his hand had gone warm. Marius Corbin sat across from him with his arms crossed and his scarred hands visible. He had not spoken since the door closed. He was waiting. Durand set the glass down. The crack ran through the middle of it like a fault line. He could see the water inside trembling from the ship's vibration and nothing else. "You want to know what the Grave of Cantor is?" Durand said. Marius nodded. A system on the far edge of the Vaar corridor. Dead space now. It used to hold 3 civilizations, all of them older than humanity by at least 4,000 years. They found something there. A mineral, a power source, a principle of physics. The records do not agree on what it was, but they destroyed each other for it. He paused. Every ship, every city, every living thing in that system was reduced to fine dust. The architects recorded the event. They watched the entire extinction happen over 200 years and did nothing. Then they left. The system has been silent ever since. Marius uncrossed his arms. He leaned forward and the light caught his face. The scar along his jaw looked darker in the yellow glow. "Why us?" he said. "Why did the probe send those coordinates to humans?" Durand picked up the glass again. He turned it so the crack faced away from him, as if that would make it disappear. "I do not know. That is the problem." The words hung in the air. Durand heard how they sounded, flat, final, a confession. He set the glass down again and looked at Marius directly. "I lied to Saren. Everything I said on the bridge about human knowledge of the architects was fabricated. I have no idea what the probe is. I have no idea what it wants. I told them we had studied it and found nothing to fear because I needed them to believe we were in control." Marius stared at him, a long beat. The ship hummed around them. "Why?" Marius said. His voice was quiet, not angry, like he was asking a question he already knew the answer to but needed to hear out loud. Durand tapped his temple with 2 fingers, an old habit he had never broken. "The Nulvara believe in logic. They believe in consistency. They evolved in an environment where deception was never necessary. A Nulvara cannot lie. They cannot even conceive of it as a viable strategy. So when I spoke to Saren, it had no framework to evaluate my words against. It heard a statement. It checked the statement against known data. The data was incomplete, so it accepted the statement. He let that settle. That is the only advantage we have, Durand said. A species that did not evolve to defend against falsehood. We are lying to them about everything. Our capabilities, our intentions, our knowledge, and so far it is working. The word made Marius's jaw tighten. So this whole war is based on a bluff, Marius said. This whole war is based on a species that cannot imagine someone saying something that is not true. Yes, that is the foundation of human strategy in the Vaar corridor. We are winning because they do not understand we are allowed to lie. Durand picked up the glass. The crack was visible again. He held it up to the light and watched the distorted reflection of his own face in the water. "Do you know what I see when I look at that?" he said. Marius did not answer. "I see someone who has told so many lies that the truth feels foreign. I open my mouth, and I do not know what will come out anymore. The line between what I believe and what I need someone else to believe has blurred to the point of invisibility." He set the glass down. His hand was steady, that was the worst part. A tone cut through the air, sharp, insistent, a priority message. Durand touched the datapad on his desk. The screen lit up with a glyph he recognized. Selenith diplomatic encoding. "Axia requests a meeting," he said. "The Selenith have intercepted something interesting." He scanned the message. His face did not change. "The Nulvara are moving ships toward the Vaar corridor. They are not retreating from the architects. They are repositioning to contain us." Marius sat back, the chair creaked. "Saren's curiosity made them nervous," Durand said. "We showed up, we intercepted a probe, we told them we were not afraid. That is not a comfort to them. That is an anomaly they cannot resolve. And their council has decided the safest response is to quarantine the source of the anomaly." Marius's hands dropped to his knees. He looked down at them for a moment, then back up. "What do we do now?" Durand touched the datapad again. The message from Axia disappeared, replaced by the star map from the probe. The grave of Cantor glowed at the edge of the display. A dead system, a mass grave. "We go to the grave of Cantor," Durand said. "We find out what the architects want, and we keep lying until we know the truth." Marius nodded. He stood up. The chair scraped against the deck. "That is a terrible plan," he said. "It is the only plan we have." Marius reached the door. He paused with his hand on the release. "You really do not know," he said. "Not a guess, not a theory, nothing." Durand looked at the glass on his desk. The water had stopped trembling. The crack ran straight through the middle like a seam that would split if he tightened his grip. "I told you the truth about one thing," Durand said. "I do not know why the probe sent those coordinates to us. I do not know what the architects want. And I do not know what we will find at the grave of Cantor." He picked up the glass. He held it in both hands. "But I know that if the Nulvara discover we have been lying to them about everything, they will not send ships to contain us. They will send ships to exterminate us. So I will keep lying. I will keep pretending I know exactly what I am doing. And when we reach that system and find something that changes everything, I will decide then whether to tell the truth or to bury it." The door opened. Marius stepped through it. Another tone, different pitch. A direct channel not routed through the diplomatic network. Durand touched the datapad. The screen flickered. Saren's voice came through, layered, uncertain. A frequency that felt like light reflected through water. "The Nulvara Council has authorized a preemptive strike on the Vaar corridor," Saren said. "The attack begins in 30 hours. A pause. The containment field on the display shimmered and pulsed. "I am not supposed to tell you this." Durand stared at the screen. The shimmering image of Saren's projection hovered in the data, silver and indigo, and something that might have been fear. "Why are you telling us?" he said. Saren did not answer immediately. The field pulsed once, twice, a rhythm like a heartbeat that did not belong to a body. "I do not know," Saren said. "I do not know why I am doing this, but the warning is real, the attack is real, and I—" Another pause, the field flickered. "I am no longer certain I am allowed to return." The channel went dark. Durand sat in the yellow circle of light. The glass was in his hand. The crack was still there. He looked at his own reflection in the water and saw a man who had told so many lies that he could not recognize the difference anymore. And now an alien had learned to lie too. The Stardrift dropped out of transit, and the grave of Cantor was nothing but a wound in the dark. Red emergency lighting painted the bridge in blood tones. Proximity alarms overlapped in a screaming chorus Marius could not untangle. Lena sat at the pilot station with both hands locked on the controls and her jaw set tight. She was not humming. She had not hummed in 3 days. Commander Durand stood at the display, his cracked spectacles catching the red glow like broken glass. He said nothing. Marius gripped the weapon's console and forced his hands still. The system outside was empty. No planets, no stations, no stars that had not already burned out. Just a debris field stretching across 100,000 kilometers, hull fragments, crystal shards, the frozen remains of something that had once been alive. 3 civilizations ground down to powder. The architect probe drifted into view behind them. It moved past the Stardrift like it had known this place all along. It stopped at the center of the debris field and hung there, small and dark, warm against the cold of the void. Then it broadcast. Every screen on the bridge lit up with images. Marius saw the first shot fired in a war so old the dust had stopped spinning. He saw ships made of light and ships made of stone and ships made of something that looked like woven bone. He saw them die. He saw them die in sequence, each civilization burning the other 2 until nothing remained but silence. The architects watched, they did nothing. Saren's containment field shimmered in the corner of the bridge, silver and indigo pulsing in a rhythm that Marius had learned to read as distress. The Nulvara emissary spoke, and its voice was layered and thin, like a signal fading across a great distance. The architects observe, the architects record, this is their purpose. Marius turned from the screens. They watch and they do nothing. They are the memory of the galaxy, Saren said. They do not shape. They do not intervene. They remember so that what is lost is not entirely gone. Marius felt something cold settle in his chest. Then why did it lead us here? The probe answered. A single line of text appeared on every display, stark and simple against the image of the dead system. What will you remember? Durand spoke for the first time. His voice was quiet and flat, like a man stating a fact he had already accepted. It is not offering help. It is offering a warning. It wants to know if we will repeat the pattern. Marius stared at the words. The red light made them look like they were bleeding. The proximity alarm changed pitch. A new signal bloomed at the edge of the system, large, angry, and moving fast. Lena's voice cracked. Commander Nulvara warship on approach. It just came out of transit. It is already targeting us. Durand did not move. He watched the display like a man watching rain approach a window. Marius slammed his hand on the console. We need to move. We need to run. The warship fired. Marius did not see the shot. He felt it. A pressure behind his eyes, a ringing in his skull that was not sound, a memory that was not his own forcing its way into his brain. The psychic assault pulse hit the Stardrift and the ship screamed. Alarms howled. The lights flickered and died, then came back weaker, dimmer. The smell of ozone and burnt insulation rolled through the bridge. Marius dropped to his knees and pressed his palms against his temples, trying to push the noise out. Saren's field flared bright. The Nulvara emissary moved between the pulse and the ship. Its containment field expanded, stretched thin like a bubble about to burst, and caught the psychic energy in midair. The energy did not pass through. It hit the field and dispersed, scattering into the void like sparks from a fire. Saren's voice came through, but it was breaking. Each syllable fragmented. I still do not understand humans. The field flickered, the silver dimmed, the indigo bled into nothing. But I believe you. The containment field collapsed. Saren's projection dissolved into static, each fragment of light dying in sequence, the way stars die when their fuel runs out. The sound of its voice became noise, then silence, then nothing at all. The emitter on the bridge went dark. Marius pushed himself up. His hands were still shaking. His head still rang. He looked at the empty space where Saren had been and felt something twist inside him that he did not have a name for. The architect probe turned. It rotated slowly, deliberately, until its dark surface faced the Nulvara warship at the edge of the system. Then it emitted a pulse. There was no light, no sound, no visible weapon. The warship's systems went dark, its weapons powered down, its engines stopped. It hung in the void like a dead thing, every circuit silent, every mind aboard stilled into unconsciousness. The probe did not destroy it. It simply turned it off, the way one might silence a noisy machine. Marius stared at the display. It just killed them. Durand shook his head slowly. It put them to sleep. It will wake them when it is gone. The probe transmitted again. A new set of coordinates appeared on the bridge displays, this time labeled with a single word. Home. Marius read the word. He read the coordinates. They pointed to human space, to the Vaar corridor, to the colonies. The probe drifted past the dead warship and vanished into transit, leaving the grave of Cantor silent and empty behind it. Lena let out a breath she had been holding. Her hands were still shaking on the controls. Her voice was barely a whisper. What did we just do? Durand removed his spectacles and wiped them on his sleeve. His hands were steady. His face betrayed nothing. We bought time. Marius looked at the empty emitter where Saren's field had been. He looked at the coordinates on the screen. He looked at the dead warship drifting in the dark. Time for what? Durand put his spectacles back on. The cracked glass caught the red light and held it. Time to decide what we remember. The observation deck of the Stardrift was a narrow room with a curved, transparent wall that showed nothing but the empty void of the grave of Cantor. The debris field glittered in the distance like frozen sparks, silent and unmoving, the remains of 3 dead civilizations hanging in the dark. Ansel Durand stood at the window with his hands in his pockets. He did not turn when Marius Corbin entered and stopped 2 steps behind him, arms crossed. Cold seeped through the glass. Frost had begun to form at the edges of the observation pane, tiny crystalline fingers reaching inward. The Nulvara fleet has halted at the edge of the Vaar corridor, Marius said. They are waiting for orders. I know. Lena says they look like they are waiting for someone to tell them what to do, that it would be a good time to hit them. Durand almost smiled. Lena is young. She thinks every problem is solved by shooting it. She is not wrong about this one. She is not right either. The silence stretched between them. Then the air in the center of the observation deck shimmered, and a projection resolved itself into the faceted form of Axia, standing just under 2 meters tall. The Selenith ambassador's crystalline surface caught the faint light from the debris field and scattered it into a dozen small rainbows. Every shift of its body produced a chime, like tiny bells breaking. Commander Durand, Axia said. Its voice was slow and deliberate, each word placed with care. I have been authorized to offer a proposal from the Selenith Collective. Durand turned. His cracked spectacles caught the light and made his face look broken, like a painting someone had torn and reassembled. I am listening. The Nulvara are frightened, Axia said. The Architect probe has done something no known technology has done in living memory. It disabled a Nulvara warship with no visible weapon. It broadcast a record of events that predate every existing species. The Nulvara Council has entered a state of strategic paralysis. I know what they are feeling, Durand said. I read the same data. Then you understand the opportunity. Axia's crystals shifted, a sound like glass grinding against glass. The Selenith will broker a ceasefire between humans and the Nulvara. We will guarantee the terms. In exchange, humans will share everything you learn from the architects. Durand was silent for a long moment. He took off his spectacles and wiped them on his sleeve, then put them back on. The gesture was slow, deliberate, almost theatrical. No, he said. Axia's chime stopped. The crystals along its surface went still, like a frozen waterfall. No, Axia repeated. You heard me. Commander Durand, the Selenith are not accustomed to being refused. Then you will need to get accustomed. Durand's voice was flat, calm, the voice of a man who had already made peace with the consequences of his choices. The architects chose humans for a reason. I do not know what that reason is yet, but I know it was not so we could sell their trust to the highest bidder. Axia's projection flickered. The temperature in the room dropped by a degree, or perhaps that was just the cold from the window. You are making a mistake, Axia said. Maybe, but it is my mistake to make. The projection vanished. The observation deck fell silent again, the only sound the hum of the ship systems and the faint crackle of frost growing at the edges of the glass. Marius shifted behind him. Are you sure about this? Durand did not turn. I am not sure about anything. That is not reassuring. It is not supposed to be. Durand pressed his palm against the cold glass. But the architects are watching, and I refuse to be the one who proves them wrong. A chime from the bridge interrupted them. A message, priority-coded, originating from the Nulvara Council. Durand tapped his earpiece and listened. Marius watched his face. The commander's expression did not change, but something shifted behind his eyes, a calculation being revised, a world rearranging itself. "What is it?" Marius asked. Durand was quiet for another 5 seconds. Then he turned and walked to the center of the observation deck, where a holographic display flickered to life. The data stream resolved into a star map of the Vaar corridor, with the Nulvara fleet marked in a pale green. But there was something else, a new layer, a recording appended to the end of the data dump the probe had transmitted at the grave of Cantor. The recording showed humans. Specifically, it showed the crew of the Vaar-Drift standing on the bridge speaking to the probe. Their voices were calm, their postures were open. They offered dialogue instead of destruction. Durand watched it twice. "The architects edited the record," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "The probe recorded everything at the grave of Cantor, the 3 dead civilizations, the war, the silence. But it also recorded us. It recorded us talking to it, and it appended that to the end of the data dump." Marius stepped closer, his brow furrowed. "Why?" "Because the Nulvara saw it. They saw humans standing in front of something they could not understand, and instead of attacking, instead of running, we talked." Durand shook his head slowly. "The architects made us look like diplomats." "Are we diplomats?" "No, we are liars. We are the species that lied its way through an entire war because the Nulvara could not conceive of deception." Durand laughed, a dry sound like paper tearing. "And the architects covered for us. They left out the parts where we were terrified and confused and barely holding it together. They showed the Nulvara the best version of us." The observation deck flickered. The probe's image appeared in the center of the room, a sphere the size of a human head, warm and dark and silent. Marius took an involuntary step back. The probe projected a map of the galaxy. Hundreds of systems marked in blue, scattered across the spiral arms like seeds thrown into wind. Each one represented a species that had achieved intelligence, that had reached the stars, that had been observed by the architects since before humanity's ancestors left the trees. One final message appeared, rendered in precise characters that resolved themselves into a human language. "You are the first to choose conversation over conflict with an enemy you outmatched. This is rare. We will continue to observe." The probe's image faded. The map lingered for another heartbeat, then dissolved into static. Durand stood in the silence, his reflection fractured in the curved glass of the observation window. Behind him, the Vaar-Drift hummed its quiet song, and the debris field glittered in the dark, and something ancient and patient and utterly beyond his comprehension watched from the void between stars. He had not asked for this, he had not earned it, but it had been given to him anyway. Marius spoke quietly from behind him. "Commander, we have a situation." Durand turned. "What kind of situation?" "The kind where the Nulvara just asked for a meeting." The medical bay smelled of antiseptic and ozone. The white walls reflected the pale light of a single lamp, and the containment field hummed at minimal power, a sound lower than it had been yesterday. Marius sat in the chair beside it and did not look at the shimmer. He could feel it anyway, a faint warmth on his cheek, like standing too close to a fire that was burning out. Saren's voice came through the field in pulses, not layered anymore, not smooth, just fragments held together by fading coherence. "You are still here." Marius pressed his palms flat against his thighs. "My shift ended an hour ago. I have nowhere else to be." "That is not an answer." He said nothing. The hum dropped a semitone, and he felt it in his chest like a missed heartbeat. Durand appeared in the doorway. He stood with one shoulder against the frame, his cracked spectacles catching the light, his hands clasped behind his back. He did not enter. Marius asked the question he had been holding since the observation deck. "Why did you do it?" The hum pulsed twice. Saren was thinking, or what passed for thinking now. "I do not know." Marius turned toward the field. The shimmer had faded to a dull silver, patches of dark spreading through it like rot in a leaf. "You must have some idea." "I am still analyzing the decision." The voice dragged on the last word, stretching it thin. It was not logical. The action did not improve my survival probability. It did not improve the survival probability of my species. "Then why?" The field flickered. Durand shifted his weight but did not speak. "Because the pattern broke." Marius waited. The hum continued its slow descent. "You are a contradiction," Saren said. "You lie as a default. You deceive without intent." You built an empire on misdirection, but when I looked at you on that bridge, I saw something the data does not explain. You were afraid, and you chose to stay anyway." Marius felt the words settle into his chest, heavy and foreign. He did not know what to do with them. Durand stepped forward. "The Nulvara Council has agreed to a ceasefire." The field brightened for a fraction of a second, then it dimmed again. "How?" Durand adjusted his spectacles. "The architects recorded our conversation with the probe. They broadcast it. The Nulvara saw humans speaking with an ancient intelligence, offering dialogue, offering trust. They could not reconcile that with the enemy they thought we were. But we were lying. We were." Durand's voice was flat, "but the record does not show the lie. It shows the intent. The architects edited the truth, or they saw past it. They preserved what we were trying to become, not what we were." The field flickered again. Saren's voice came through, softer now, almost a whisper. "I am proud of my species for making this choice." The humming paused. A long silence stretched through the room, filled only by the sterile air cycling through the vents. "And I am proud of humans for becoming something worth that choice." Marius looked at his hands. The scars from the welding accident were pale against his skin. He had not thought about that day in years. He had not reported it because he was afraid of losing his posting, and he had been right to be afraid, and that was the kind of world he lived in. Saren had thrown itself into a psychic blast for a species that could not stop lying. He did not know what to call that. "What happens now?" Marius asked. "The architects will leave." The voice was fading, each word separated by a pause that grew longer. "They have what they came for, data on a new species, a species that broke the pattern." Durand stepped closer to the bed. "Humans will not leave. We have a duty now, to prove the architect's trust was not misplaced." The field hummed, once, twice, a sound like a breath that did not quite finish. Saren's voice came through one last time, barely audible, the words overlapping at the edges as the containment struggled to hold them. "I wish I could see what you become." The pitch dropped. The silver shimmer collapsed inward, folding into a point of pale light that hung in the air for a single heartbeat. Then it was gone. The silence that followed was absolute. No hum, no pulse, no layered voice. Just the white walls and the sterile air and the empty containment field that had held a being that was no longer there. Marius sat in the chair. He felt something warm on his face, and he touched his cheek and found it wet. He had been crying without noticing. He did not know if he was crying for Saren or for himself, or for the weight of everything they had done to reach this moment. The lies, the bluff, the war fought on a foundation of words that meant nothing and everything at the same time. It did not matter. The tears were real, that was enough. Durand stood in the doorway. He did not say anything. He did not need to. His stillness said everything. The quiet of a man who had paid a price he swore he would not pay and was still standing somehow on the other side. Marius wiped his face with the back of his hand. The antiseptic smell pressed into his lungs. He looked at the empty field and tried to remember Saren's voice, but it was already slipping away, like a dream dissolving at dawn. A soft chime came from Durand's datapad. He looked down at it. His face did not change, but something in his posture shifted. "The architects are moving." Marius stood. His legs felt hollow, but he stood anyway. "Where?" Durand held up the datapad. The screen showed a single image. A human hand reaching out, palm open, toward a shimmer of indigo light. The record of Saren's death, preserved, saved. The first time the architects had ever recorded an act of self-sacrifice between species. The probe was drifting away from the system now, carrying that image to an unknown destination, to an audience that no living being had ever seen. And Marius knew, with a certainty that settled into his bones like cold water, that the image was not the end of the record. It was the beginning. The bridge of the Stardrift felt wrong, not broken, not damaged, wrong. The lights were back to full white, the damaged control boards showed green across every system, but the hum of the repaired crystalline hull had shifted. A half-tone off, a resonance that did not quite match the original frequency. The ship had healed its cracks, but it remembered the wounds. Ansel Durand sat in the captain's chair, cracked spectacles catching the light. He had not taken them off in 3 days. He was not sure he remembered what the world looked like without the fractures. Marius Corbin stood at the communications station, eyes fixed on the tactical display. The architect probe was a single bright point moving away from the grave of Cantor, accelerating steadily. Beyond visual range now. beyond anything except the numbers. Lena Eklund sat at the pilot's console, hands resting on the controls. She was not humming. She had not hummed since Saren dissolved. The silence on the bridge had a texture to it, something thick and waiting. The ceasefire held. The Nulvara had withdrawn to the drift, their warships pulling back into the void lanes they had occupied for centuries. Human colonies in the Vaar corridor were returning to normal operations. Supply ships were moving again. Families were coming out of shelters. The war was over. It did not feel like winning. Marius spoke without turning. Probe signal is dropping below threshold, 30 seconds to loss of contact. Durand nodded. He had watched the numbers. The probe was not going to another system. It was not going to another galaxy. It was accelerating along a vector that did not correspond to any known gravitational body, and its signal was fading not because of distance, but because of something else. Something the sensors could not model. 20 seconds, Marius said. The point of light on the display grew fainter. Not dimmer, fainter, as though it was receding from the concept of light itself. 10 seconds. Durand leaned forward. He wanted to remember this. He wanted to remember the exact moment the architects decided they had seen enough. 5. The probe's icon flickered. Then it was gone. Not a trail, not a ping, not a residual echo. It stopped existing in observable space. The sensors reported nothing. The display showed empty starfield where a moment before there had been a signal. Signal lost, Marius said. His voice was flat. All bands, all frequencies, it's gone. Durand stared at the empty space. They will be back, he said. He did not raise his voice. He spoke to no one in particular, or maybe to the room itself, to the ship that had carried them here. They always come back to check their notes. Marius said nothing. He was not looking at the display anymore. He was looking at the space where the probe had been, and his jaw was set in a way Durand recognized. He was already thinking about it, already turning it over in his mind. What the architects had seen, what they had recorded, what they would write about humanity. A chime sounded from the communications station. Marius glanced at the readout. Incoming transmission, encrypted Selenith channel, high priority flag. Durand felt something settle in his chest. He had been expecting this. He had been dreading it. Put it through. The air above the center of the bridge shimmered. Light gathered and coalesced into facets, each one catching the white glow of the repaired ceiling panels. Ixia took shape slowly, deliberately, as if the crystal being was savoring the act of arrival. The Selenith ambassador stood just under 2 meters tall, its body a lattice of translucent silicate, every angle catching and splitting the light. A faint harmonic chime accompanied the final settling of its form. Ixia turned its head, the facets of its face shifting to orient on Durand. The gesture was precise, almost mechanical, but the silence that followed was not mechanical at all. It was patient, waiting. Ixia spoke, and its voice was the sound of stones shifting in a slow river. Commander Durand, I have requested this meeting to conclude our observations. Durand did not rise from the captain's chair. The ceasefire is holding. The Nulvara have withdrawn. What else is there to conclude? Ixia's crystal surface caught the light as it tilted its head. The Selenith have learned something valuable from this encounter, something we did not expect to learn. Enlighten me. We have learned that humans are not to be traded with like other species. Ixia paused, and the silence stretched. You are unpredictable. Your actions do not follow the economic models we use to calculate value and risk. You cannot be hedged against. You cannot be predicted. Durand allowed himself a thin smile. That is the most diplomatic way anyone has ever called humans dangerous. It was not intended as diplomacy, Ixia said. It was intended as observation. But the observation leads to a conclusion, and the conclusion leads to an offer. Marius turned from the communications station. His hands were at his sides, and his posture was careful. What kind of offer? Ixia shifted, its crystalline body producing a low chime. The Selenith will not share what we have learned about human deception with the Nulvara. We will keep your secret. In exchange, humans will allow Selenith observers on human worlds. 1 observer per major colony. No restrictions on movement. Full access to public records and cultural artifacts. The bridge went still. Lena's hands stopped moving over the controls. The hum of the repaired hull seemed to grow louder, the off-key resonance pressing against the silence. Durand stared at Ixia. He kept his voice level. Why would you do that? Why would you protect our secrets? Ixia's form pulsed, a slow wave of light moving through the crystal lattice. Because secrets are a currency. A shared secret is a bond. You hold knowledge the architects chose to give you. We want to see what you do with it. Marius stepped forward. What happens if we refuse? Ixia's voice did not change. The stones kept their steady rhythm. Then the secret gets out. Every species in the galaxy learns that humans built an entire diplomatic victory on a foundation of lies. The Nulvara will know they were deceived. The Praxis will know. The Ironfield will know. The Rootmind will know. Your reputation will be destroyed, and your colonies will be vulnerable to any species that decides human dishonesty is a threat that must be contained. Durand felt the weight of it settle across his shoulders. A trap laid with perfect precision. Accept the deal and bind humanity to the Selenith by debt and observation. Refuse the deal and watch everything they had gained collapse into ash. He looked at Marius. Marius met his eyes. The mechanic's face was scarred and tired, the lines deeper than they had been a week ago. He did not speak. He gave a single nod. Durand turned back to Ixia. The cracked spectacles caught the light, splitting it into fragments. He could see the bridge through the fractures, the world broken into pieces and reassembled wrong. Accepted, he said. The word tasted like ash, like copper, like the silence after a scream. Ixia's crystal body settled into stillness. The faint chime that accompanied the motion was softer this time, almost gentle. The observers will arrive within 3 standard weeks. Your colonies will be notified through diplomatic channels. The terms are final. Understood. Ixia's form began to dissolve. The facets scattered the light, and the shimmer collapsed inward, and then the projection was gone. The bridge was empty of everything except the hum and the silence and the 3 humans who had just sold a piece of their future. Lena spoke for the first time in hours. Her voice was quiet. Commander, the probe is gone. The war is over. What do we do now? Durand did not answer immediately. He looked at the display where the architect probe had vanished. He looked at the numbers that showed empty space. He thought about Saren, dissolved into static, a pattern that broke itself for strangers. He thought about the lies he had told and the truths he had withheld and the debt he had just signed humanity's name to. We remember, he said. That was what the architects asked. That was the only thing they wanted to know. What will we remember? Marius turned back to the communications station. His hands found the edge of the console, and he stood there, not touching anything, just standing. The architects edited the record. They put us in it. They chose to include us in their memory of this place. Durand nodded slowly. They will come back to check their notes, and when they do, they will want to see what we have done with what they gave us. Marius said nothing, but his hands tightened on the edge of the console, and his eyes stayed fixed on the empty space where the probe had been. The Stardrift hummed its off-key song. The war was over. Victory tasted like ash. And somewhere in a realm where physics as humans understood it did not apply, the architects were watching, waiting to see what humanity would write.